The first red flag wasn't him mispronouncing Kubernetes. It was the way he looked at me like I was a smudge on his Patagonia vest. "We just need someone with a more technical leadership aura," he said, like he was reading it off a goddamn smoothie label. That's what they brought in after Series A, Mr. Silicon Savior. Hair gel, TED Talk Energy, and a GitHub profile with more forks than contributions. He shook my hand like it was a wet napkin and said, "You've done great work here, Marla. Now we're looking to scale leadership. Translation, pack your shit, but train your replacement before you go." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. I just nodded, smiled, and asked him which deployment environment he wanted the production pipeline staged through. His eyes glazed over like I'd just recited witchcraft. He tried to bluff, said something about streamlining Jenkins through Docker, which didn't even make sense in context. I watched his new golden boy, the guy with the crypto startup that tanked in 18 months, furiously Google what is a Terraform state lock. They gave me 2 weeks, said it was a graceful offboarding window. They framed it like a favor, like I was being gifted time to document tribal knowledge, gave them just enough to avoid HR complaints. A few Notion pages, a couple of outdated diagrams, and a goodbye cake that looked like it had been decorated by someone blindfolded and bitter. Vanilla sheet cake, "We'll miss you, Marla," in Comic Sans. Nobody clapped. Nobody looked me in the eye. On my last Friday, I took the long way home. Sat in my car outside the office, hands on the steering wheel, engine off. Thought about everything I built, pipelines, alerting systems, IAM hierarchies so clean even AWS support once complimented them. And now all that was being handed over to LinkedIn cowboys who used ChatGPT to write their bash scripts. Oh, and hey, if you've ever been bulldozed by someone dumber but louder, and you like watching karma unfold slower than molasses in January, go ahead and hit subscribe. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers before the guy who replaced me figures out how to exit Vim. Anyway, that weekend, while Chad the Wonder CTO was tweeting about scaling resilience through culture, I was exporting logs. Quietly, thoroughly, access lists, billing snapshots, subnet diagrams. I didn't sabotage a thing. I just kept what was mine, what I built. Like a chef walking out with her knife roll, tools of the trade, maybe a few recipes they never deserved. Then I set one final calendar reminder, 29 days out. AWS billing cycle reset, just a little tickle in the future. A polite ding for when entropy begins. By Monday, I was gone. My badge deactivated, my Slack account archived, but the stack, it still spoke my language. And soon, it'd start forgetting theirs. They wanted tutorials. I gave him tutorials. I recorded 12 90-second Loom videos with the energy of a DMV employee on ketamine. This is how you deploy. Assuming the pipeline hasn't been reconfigured by someone who thinks YAML is a breakfast cereal. Click Next. To rotate keys, don't forget to revoke the old ones, unless you enjoy waking up to 3 a.m. Pager duty alerts. But hey, maybe that's your kink. I didn't even put on makeup. Gave myself a virtual background of a burning dumpster. Nobody noticed. The docs I left behind were the digital equivalent of IKEA instructions, just enough to assemble the chair, not enough to understand why there's an extra screw or why it squeaks every time someone logs in. I even labeled one Confluence page, "Start here if you dare." Spoiler alert, it linked to a 404. Meanwhile, on my encrypted personal drive, buried under 5 layers of folders labeled Taxes 2017 and pics from Mom, I was building the real archive. The cathedral, full access logs annotated, billing history mapped to team activity spikes. IAM roles, who created them, who last used them, and this one was Juicy, who forgot to delete them. My own quiet Rosetta Stone. Credential hierarchies laid out like a mob family tree. You want S3 access, or know who controlled the parent policy. You want root access? Oops, wrong branch, buddy. Try again in 29 days. I saved it all like a good digital hoarder, nested, hashed, timestamped, with a read-only backup in an offshore bucket only I could reach. Because if you're going to be forced out of your own house, you better keep a copy of the blueprints, especially when you know the new tenants are lighting matches in the gas line. I took my time winding down. Didn't rush. Every click I made felt like polishing headstones. On my last day, I cleared my desk, unplugged my mechanical keyboard, the one no one else could stand because it clicked like a Geiger counter on Chernobyl's doorstep, and wiped it down with the care of someone sealing an exhibit. At 4:47 p.m., Someone dropped off a store-bought farewell cake from the grocery chain across the street. Yellow sponge, buttercream frosting. The kind that peels off like latex. Luck Marla scrawled in red gel like a horror movie title card. Nobody sang. Nobody clapped. Most just hovered awkwardly by the coffee machine, pretending to be in meetings or texting someone cooler. I smiled, took a picture of the cake. Not because I wanted to remember it, but because I knew one day I'd need a reminder of just how cheap their gratitude was. Then I opened my phone, scrolled to the little calendar app, and tapped on a certain Tuesday. Set a reminder, billing cycle reset. Let the countdown begin. No alarm, no email alert, just a whisper in time. And just like that, I walked out. But not before I gently unplugged the conference room Echo Dot and left it on the floor behind the mini fridge. Because chaos, like revenge, thrives on the little things. It started with a ping that never arrived. Just a small hiccup, easily missed in the avalanche of status noise. But to me, it was a symphony. First violin string snapping in what would become a beautifully disastrous performance. The new CTO and his freshly imported crew of tech bros had taken their seats on the Titanic's bridge and were already yanking levers they didn't understand. I watched from afar, an alt Slack account named Ops Observer hidden under the Integrations tab, camouflaged among stale webhooks no one had cleaned in months. The first move, cost optimization. Always a crowd favorite. Nuked unused policies, shaved off old roles, and pruned access keys like a toddler trims bonsai, with scissors, no plan, and a sugar high. Except one of those unused policies was tied to a Lambda function that fed our Slack alert system, which meant when the marketing site lost contact with the database for 11 minutes, nobody noticed. Not until a customer opened a ticket. By then, Datadog had already fired off 3 false alerts about CPU surges that didn't exist. Chad, the golden retriever with root access, spent an hour toggling through graphs, blinking like he was reading the Rosetta Stone backwards. His big fix: reboot the container and post in Hashin for updates. Legacy issue: cleaning out cobwebs. Yeah, cobwebs. That's what he called the architecture that kept them afloat for 5 years. Meanwhile, back in my private logs, since they didn't even realize we're pinging external buckets, I saw it all unfold like a soap opera. IP requests timing out. Latency spikes they didn't know were connected. The repo they cloned had hard-coded assumptions about subnet rules I'd manually tuned by hand. But instead of asking questions, they rolled forward like frat boys trying to fix a leaky keg with Gorilla Glue and denial. Then came the first clue. A charge. 4 cents. $0.04 in AWS usage, logged at 3:18 a.m., tied to a dummy service that no longer existed, at least not in their dashboard. No one noticed. No one flagged it, but I saw it. Because that 4 cents wasn't a mistake, it was a breadcrumb. One of many. You don't burn down a house you built from scratch. You just leave the gas line running and wait for someone to light a scented candle. At this point, I could see the Slack channel slowly mutating. More noise, more blame, engineers publicly shrugging, private DMs flying, my former team good people trying to hold things together with duct tape and trauma bonding. One of them messaged Ops Observer by accident, thinking it was an old webhook. Did you see that billing spike? Yes. Yes, I did, and I smiled, just a little. No gloating, no rage, just that cold, satisfied twitch in the cheek when someone finally touches the wire you marked do not touch in 3 different wikis. I poured a whiskey that night, watched the CPU charts wiggle like worms on hot pavement, and thought, this is gonna be fun. By week 4, the smell of panic was so thick you could mop the floors with it. It started with the emails. Customers weren't getting password resets. Then support couldn't trigger onboarding sequences. Elgun threw silent errors because the IAM role used to authenticate outbound traffic had mysteriously vanished. Not revoked, not rotated, just gone, like it never existed, like the system was gaslighting itself. Then the login gateway began timing out during peak hours. CTO Chad blamed a recent dependency update, never considering that the real culprit was a permissions chain I'd built like an ancient temple, interlocked policies, fine-grained, intentional. One piece removed, the others didn't collapse immediately. They just forgot how to hold. By the time the container builds failed, mid-deploy during a client demo, I knew the spiral had begun. They called it a CI/CD refactor issue. That was the spin. But internally, Chad turned full witch hunt. accused two senior engineers of neglecting code quality in front of the entire dev channel. These were guys who'd worked 60-hour weeks, carried the product on their backs while Chad was busy hosting tech culture bonfires on LinkedIn. One of them, Ravi, rage quit on a Tuesday. The other, Alina, turned in her resignation with a time-stamped Slack message. When leadership stops listening, the infrastructure stops speaking. A poetic little grenade. She even included a screenshot of her last successful build, 2 weeks prior. And who did they promote in the chaos? My replacement. Poor Matt. To his credit, Matt meant well, fresh out of boot camp. Eager, polite. But he didn't know a subnet from a sandwich, and now he was running point on an infrastructure he couldn't spell, let alone support. I caught glimpses of him on Zooms, eyes twitching, beard growing patchier by the hour, fingers drumming like a trapped raccoon trying to escape a cereal box. I almost felt bad. Almost. Behind the scenes, he was DMing everyone, asking questions like, "What's this Kinesis audit handler role? Anyone know where that lives?" The answer, of course, was nowhere, because it was one of the IAM roles I'd quietly retired. On paper, it still echoed through Terraform state files. But in AWS, it was a ghost. No policy, no trust relationship, just a memory. They found more like it. Dozens. Service accounts that referenced S3 buckets they couldn't see. Lambda functions tagged with metadata like deprecated do not touch, yet somehow still powering live features. Every corner they turned, the past whispered back, "You should have asked Marla." Chad, he doubled down, hosted a company-wide call, put on his CEO voice and said, "This is just tech debt coming due. We're cleaning house." But even his bros looked unconvinced. The vibe had shifted. What used to be swagger now smelled like flop sweat and forgotten passwords. I, on the other hand, was watching everything unfold through my own quiet dashboard when I'd kept running just long enough to monitor their unraveling. I sipped my coffee, stared at the error logs stacking up like unwashed dishes, and whispered, "Now you're speaking my language." The logs were supposed to be immutable. Immutable, my ass. They noticed it during a compliance check-in. A junior security analyst, bless her underpaid soul, went hunting for last month's audit trail and found a beautiful, gaping void. No entries, no anomalies, just silence, as if the servers had spent the last 30 days politely doing nothing. Which, in a cloud stack this busy, is like saying a Walmart parking lot on Black Friday didn't register a single tire mark. Naturally, they panicked. Chad slapped on his serious tech guy face and called in a consultant, one of those kids from Twitter who wears O'Reilly shirts ironically and talks like a black hat speaker on day 3 of no sleep. He poked around for 2 hours, then muttered, "Might have had a credential leak." Might have. As in, definitely, but no one wants to say it out loud because doing so means filing a breach report, maybe even calling legal. Chad's face went stiff. He cracked his knuckles like that would undo the growing mountain of invisible liability. The consultant suggested locking down keys, cycling roles, rebuilding IAM trees from scratch. Basically, start over. But then someone asked, where would the leak point be? That's when it got quiet. Because the logs that might have shown a leak were gone, not deleted, missing. No trace of deletion events, just void, and void in cloud architecture is a message. It's not emptiness, it's redacted history. As if the system had been cleaned by someone who knew exactly how the logs were written, stored, and rotated, and who also knew how long it would take before anyone noticed. Meanwhile, billing team flagged a quiet little spike. Costs up 22% with zero associated increase in compute hours. No new instances, no burst workloads, just a subtle uptick, most of it in CloudWatch and data transfer. Someone had been watching something from somewhere, but the receipts didn't exist anymore. Chad, sweating now, reached out to AWS support, made a fuss, threw around words like enterprise SLA and regulatory exposure, hit him with corporate indifference so thick it should have come in a jar. We don't manage customer keys. If there's been a credential issue, we recommend rotating access and enabling CloudTrail logging. They had already enabled CloudTrail. That was the problem, and it had betrayed them with a smile and a shrug. The consultant was poking deeper now. He pulled a list of live services, started tracing their outbound network calls. That's when he saw it, one server, tiny EC2 instance still quietly running in an availability zone nobody used, buried under an old staging tag. It was pinging a domain every 60 seconds like a loyal dog checking in with its owner. The domain? A nondescript one, nothing flashy. But its registry info traced back, if you squinted, did a little digital sleuthing, and had access to a Whois archive, to a certain Marla Lynn Decker. My maiden name, tucked neatly under a privacy shield, still detectable if you knew where to look. They hadn't shut it down because they didn't even know it was alive. And I'd left it just long enough, just subtle enough, for someone curious to find. By now, the humiliation had flavor, thick and metallic. You could hear it in the silences between their Zoom calls. You could see it in the way Chad stopped CCing people on blame emails and started BCCing legal. They still didn't understand what was happening. They knew something was. And I was enjoying a second espresso on my porch, watching the clouds roll in, both literal and digital, thinking how poetic it all was. Funny what you can do with a phantom and a ping. The email came in at 3:14 a.m., subject line, "Need help rebuilding your stack, no greeting, no sign-off." Just a single sentence in the body. Thought you might want a second opinion before this quarter ends. Attached was a link. Chad should have ignored it. Should have flagged it, trashed it, anything except what he actually did, click it. Because under the performance hoodie and posturing, he was exactly the kind of desperate that makes dumb look brave. The link opened a clean, elegant dashboard. Nothing flashy. Black background, subtle gradients, real-time metrics scrolling like a heartbeat monitor for every vein of their crumbling infrastructure. CPU health, traffic flow, key rotations, cost estimates, even snapshot integrity. Not a dashboard, the one I used to maintain. It was running flawlessly, better actually than when I left, because I'd kept it warm. I'd nurtured it in exile, behind VPN walls and obfuscated routes like a bonsai tree in a panic room. While they were scrambling to plug leaks, I'd been tending the real system, feeding it just enough data to stay alive, but not enough to betray me. And now I'd returned it, like a ransom note with a heartbeat. At first, Chad lost his mind, marched into Hash Engineering All and asked who the hell made this. He even accused Matt, poor sleep-deprived Matt, of building it behind his back like some sort of DevOps Banksy. But Matt just looked like he hadn't slept since Easter. His reply, "I thought you sent it." Legal was looped in next. "Is this a breach?" One of them typed, like anyone was still sure what normal looked like. CTO started drafting paranoid emails, demanded endpoint scans, ran packet sniffers like he was trying to catch ghosts in a butterfly net. But what really cracked him wasn't the dashboard. It was the footer. Tiny, bottom right in muted gray, maintained by Latchkey Infrastructure Group, LLC. He Googled it. Small consulting firm. Just registered. Delaware-based, of course. Generic landing page with a contact form, no names. Except, if you looked closely, real closely, you'd see a line in the domain registrar's public filing. Registrant, Marla L. Decker. He didn't throw a chair. I know because I checked the Office Nest cam feed, the one they forgot to rotate passwords for. But he did sit there for 23 minutes straight, unmoving, staring at that dashboard like it had personally insulted his ancestors. His face cycled through every stage of denial, confusion, outrage, blame, sweat, silence. He was furious. But also, he couldn't look away. Because every single data point on that screen was accurate. More accurate than the garbage they were pulling from their own janky Grafana setup. My setup still worked, still lived, and deep down, he knew the awful truth. He didn't just need it, he needed me. I didn't message him, didn't reply, didn't even poke the bear. Because silence, in moments like this, speaks louder than Slack rants and budget blowouts ever could. And somewhere across the country, a little AWS instance pinged again. Just to say, still watching, still waiting. The reckoning came on a Thursday. Not a dramatic boardroom confrontation like in the movies, no yelling, no flipped tables, just a calendar invite titled Q2 Cost Review, Urgent. When an investor labels something urgent, you don't bring coffee, you bring explanations. Or, in Chad's case, a handful of half-truths duct taped together with confident buzzwords and misplaced swagger. The moment he joined the Zoom, he knew something was off. No jokes, no small talk. Just Harold Brandt from Falcon Ridge Ventures staring at him like he was a roach in the hummus. "Your AWS bill has tripled since March," Harold said, voice clipped like a hedge trimmer. "We'd like a walkthrough of the variance." Chad, ever the frat house diplomat, launched into his song and dance. We're expanding functionality, increased telemetry, scaling to match velocity. He even threw in legacy debt absorption, which isn't a thing, but sounded expensive enough to buy him 5 minutes. Then Harold cut him off. "We already pulled the logs." Boom. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was funeral awkward. Because the logs, what was left of them, told a different story. Role mismatches, failed auth attempts, cycles of revoked keys and disabled monitors, spikes in storage reads that didn't map to usage. All indicators of a system trying to function with half its skeleton missing. And worse, they'd noticed the ghost infrastructure. The pings. The fact that some services, particularly the most reliable ones, weren't being served by their internal stack anymore. Harold didn't even need to raise his voice. He just clicked a link, popped the same dashboard Chad had been losing sleep over. Real-time data. No errors, no skipped beats, and at the bottom again, maintained by Latchkey Infrastructure Group, LLC. Harold leaned forward. "Do you know who that is?" Chad lied. "No idea." That's when Harold shared his screen and pulled up a legal doc, the LLC registration form. A small, seemingly insignificant line, Marla Lynn Decker. He paused. Let it sink in. "Isn't that your former head of infrastructure?" Chad froze like he'd been unplugged. The room, virtual but still heavy, went still. No one spoke. A junior partner muted herself mid-laugh. You could practically hear a Slack channel erupting off-screen in a panic. Harold continued, calm but lethal. "We brought in a third-party audit last week. They said the original infrastructure was, and I quote, elegant, scalable, and insulated against catastrophic failure by design." Clicked again. Another slide. Their conclusion: most of what's failing now is due to mismanaged permissions and improper handoff. And the worst part? Recovery is impossible without whoever architected it. The camera zoomed slightly as Harold leaned closer. You let your best asset walk out the door, and now you're paying for her shadow. Chad tried to deflect, stammer something about rebuilding better, about hiring a DevSecOps consultant from Berlin. No one was listening anymore. Not really, because the quiet truth had landed like a fist in a velvet glove. He'd built nothing, and he couldn't even maintain what someone else had. Meanwhile, 3 states away, I refreshed my business inbox. A new email. Subject: Consulting Inquiry, Falcon Ridge Ventures Referral Body. We'd like to discuss an urgent opportunity. Revenge doesn't always need a big reveal. Sometimes it just needs an invoice. Final nail came wrapped in Helvetica new and polite menace. Subject line: Official quote, Infrastructure Restoration Services attachment. A polished PDF with my company letterhead, clean as a confession. Top line in bold: Comprehensive stack restoration, $18,500 flat. First hour complimentary. Below it, a multi-page blueprint of their original system, every policy, every route table, every dependency annotated like gospel. The diagram was a work of art, color-coded, scalable, time-stamped down to the build. At the bottom, my initials, neat and unmistakable, ML. Chad didn't respond, not directly. Instead, he ghosted the finance thread, turned off Slack notifications, and sat through meetings like a mannequin in a Patagonia vest. By now, even the junior staff could smell the rot on him. The founders were circling. Legal was quietly collecting receipts. Falcon Ridge had made it very clear: either fix this or we're pulling the plug. Then came the board meeting. Cameras on, ties tightened, a tray of sadness bagels sweating in a corner of their actual conference room. Chad logged in early, tried to control the vibe, set the narrative. "We're exploring outside support," he said. "We've got leads, just vetting options." Then the founder, Alex, cut in. He'd been quiet for weeks, letting Chad spiral into his own incompetence. Today, his tone was different, less tech bro, more funeral director. "Actually," Alex said, "we've already initiated discussions with a vendor who came highly recommended." Click. A new participant entered the Zoom. Me, button-down shirt, hair up. No filter, no flair. Just coffee in one hand and years of quiet resentment in the other. I smiled politely, mourning everyone. The room went still. Chad's face collapsed like a bad souffle. Mouth open, pupils twitching. Tried to talk, but only managed a single word. "Her?" Alex nodded. "Yes, her. The person who kept this place from imploding for half a decade." I scrolled to the final slide on my shared screen. A live, read-only feed of their infrastructure, my infrastructure, still purring like a satisfied cat. "This," I said, "is the system you're trying to rebuild. You don't need to, you just need the keys. And I have them." Silence. And before anyone asks, no, I didn't delete anything. I didn't sabotage. I didn't break a single thing. I sipped my coffee. I just re-owned it. One billing cycle at a time, I let it hang there. The truth, the price, the power. The founder nodded once. Slow, final. Let's begin. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.